The bullet grazed Owen Vaughn's shoulder on a Tuesday afternoon in April of 1878, reminding him that death was always closer than water in these parched lands of southern Colorado. And he figured this might be the day the drought finally claimed him along with everything else he had tried to hold on to. He pressed his back against the weathered boards of the Fort Lyon General Store, his hand clamping down on the wound as blood seeped between his fingers. 3 men with rifles stood in the dusty street, their faces wrapped in bandanas, and Owen knew exactly why they had come. The water rights dispute had been simmering for months, ever since the Arkansas River had dwindled to barely a trickle and desperation had turned neighbors into enemies. "Come on out, Vaughn," called the tallest of the 3 men. Owen recognized the voice as belonging to Marcus Trent, a rancher whose cattle were dying by the dozens. "You got no right to dam up that creek. We all need water." Owen's throat was dry as the cracked earth beneath his boots. He had not dammed anything. The creek on his property had simply stopped flowing 3 weeks ago, same as everything else in this God-forsaken corner of Colorado territory. But men seeing their livelihoods turn to dust did not care much for reason. "There is no water to give," Owen shouted back, his voice hoarse. "The creek is bone dry." Another shot rang out, splintering the wood near his head. Owen ducked and ran toward the back of the building, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. The town had emptied when the shooting started, folks scattering like tumbleweeds. He rounded the corner and nearly collided with someone. She stood there holding a medical bag, her green eyes wide but steady, her dark auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun beneath a simple bonnet. She wore a traveling dress that had seen better days, covered in the dust of long roads, and she did not scream or faint at the sight of his bloody shoulder. "You are shot," she said, and her voice carried an Eastern accent, refined but not pretentious. "Noticed that myself," Owen said, glancing back toward the street. He could hear the men's boots on the wooden planks of the boardwalk. "I am a nurse," the woman said firmly. "Let me see it." "Madam, this is not the time for social calls. Those men are trying to kill me." She grabbed his arm with surprising strength and pulled him toward a narrow alley between the general store and the abandoned milliner's shop next door. "Then we should get you somewhere they cannot finish the job." Owen had no good argument against that logic, and the determined set of her jaw told him she would not take no for an answer anyway. He followed her into the dim alley, and she pushed open a door he had never noticed before. It led into the back room of the milliner's shop, now thick with dust and filled with abandoned hat forms and faded ribbons. The woman closed the door quietly and guided him to sit on an old wooden crate. She knelt beside him and set down her medical bag, her movements quick and efficient. "I need to see the wound properly," she said, already working at the buttons of his shirt. Owen winced as she peeled back the blood-soaked fabric. Outside, he could hear the men calling his name, their voices growing more agitated. "What is your name?" he asked, partly to distract himself from the pain and partly because he figured if he was going to die today, he should at least know the name of the last kind person he met. "Sophia Emerson," she said, examining the wound with practiced eyes. "The bullet went through. That is fortunate. It did not hit anything vital, but you have lost blood." "Owen Vaughn," he said, "and I am starting to think my luck might be changing." She glanced up at him with those steady green eyes, and for just a moment, something passed between them. Then she returned her attention to his shoulder, cleaning the wound with water from a canteen she carried in her bag. "Why are those men shooting at you?" she asked, her voice low. "Water," Owen said simply. "Or the lack of it. Everyone is fighting over what little there is left." Sophia was quiet for a moment as she bandaged his shoulder with strips of clean cloth from her bag. Her touch was gentle but sure, and Owen found himself watching her face as she worked. She had a small scar on her chin, barely visible, and freckles across her nose that spoke of time spent in the sun despite her obvious attempts at propriety. "I came west because I heard there was need for medical help," Sophia said softly. "I did not expect to be treating gunshot wounds on my first day in town." "Welcome to Fort Lyon," Owen said with a bitter laugh. "We are a friendly sort when we are not dying of thirst." The door to the shop suddenly rattled and both of them froze. Heavy footsteps moved across the main floor, stirring up dust that filtered through the cracks in the door frame. "I know you are in here somewhere, Vaughn," Marcus Trent's voice called out. "Might as well face this like a man." Sophia's hand found Owen's, her fingers cool against his palm. She looked at him with an expression that was half concern and half determination, and Owen realized she was not going to let him go out there alone. "Stay here," he whispered. She shook her head. "You are injured. You cannot fight." "I do not plan to fight. I plan to talk." "Men with guns rarely want to talk." Owen squeezed her hand gently. "Then I will tell them about the rain." "What rain?" Sophia whispered. "You said the creek was dry." "Exactly," Owen said, rising to his feet despite the pain in his shoulder. "But if I can make them understand that killing me will not bring water, maybe they will listen to reason." He moved toward the door that led to the main shop floor, and Sophia followed close behind. When he pushed through, Marcus Trent and his two companions spun around, rifles raising. "Easy," Owen said, his hands up. "I am not armed." Marcus's eyes narrowed above his bandana. "Where is our water, Vaughn?" "There is no water, Marcus. You know that. Every creek and stream for 50 miles is running dry. The Arkansas is barely a trickle. Killing me will not change that." "Your land has that spring up in the rocks," one of the other men said. Owen recognized him as Henry Walsh, a farmer whose wheat fields had turned to dust. "We know you got water stashed somewhere." "That spring dried up in February," Owen said. "I have been hauling water from town same as everyone else." "Liar." Marcus took a step forward, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Stop." Sophia's voice rang out clear and strong as she stepped around Owen. "Shooting him will not bring rain. It will only make you murderers." Marcus stared at her, confused by this sudden appearance. "Who are you?" "Someone who knows that this drought is not one man's fault," Sophia said. "I have traveled through 3 territories to get here, and it is the same everywhere. The rains have failed, but they will come again. They always do." "My cattle cannot wait for always," Marcus said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. "Then we need to work together," Sophia said. "Find what water there is and share it fairly. Killing each other will only mean fewer hands to help when the rain does come." Owen watched her in amazement. She had been in town for perhaps an hour, knew nothing of these men or their grievances, and yet she spoke with such conviction that even hardened ranchers were lowering their weapons. "She is right," Owen said. "Marcus, I swear to you on my mother's grave, there is no water on my land. But if we pool what resources we have, we can get through this." Marcus studied them both for a long moment, then slowly lowered his rifle. "If you are lying, Vaughn, this is not over." "I am not lying," Owen said. The 3 men backed toward the door, their weapons still ready but no longer aimed. When they finally left, Owen let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. He turned to Sophia, who was already looking pale, the adrenaline clearly wearing off. "That was either very brave or very foolish," he said. "Perhaps both," she admitted, and then she laughed. It was a bright, clear sound that seemed impossible in that dusty, abandoned shop. It rang out like music, like church bells, like something Owen had forgotten existed in the world. Her laughter transformed her face, chasing away the worry lines and making her eyes sparkle with life. Owen found himself laughing too, though his shoulder throbbed with each movement. It was the kind of laughter that comes after surviving something terrible, the kind that acknowledges how close death had been and celebrates being alive anyway. "I have not laughed like that in months," Owen said when he finally caught his breath. "Neither have I," Sophia said, wiping tears from her eyes. "Perhaps not since I left Boston." "Boston," Owen repeated. "That is a long way from here." "3 weeks on trains and stage coaches," Sophia said. "My late husband was a doctor. When he passed last year, I decided I wanted to do something meaningful with the medical training he had given me. I heard the territories needed nurses." "I am sorry about your husband," Owen said. Sophia nodded, a shadow passing over her face. "Thank you. It has been difficult, but staying in Boston with all those memories would have been worse. I needed a fresh start." "Well, you certainly got one," Owen said, gesturing at the bullet hole in his shoulder. "Though I apologize that Fort Lyon welcomed you with gunfire." "Better than indifference," Sophia said with a small smile. "At least I know my skills will be needed here." Owen studied her more carefully now that the immediate danger had passed. She was probably around 25, he guessed, with the kind of quiet strength that came from facing genuine hardship. Her hands were steady as she checked his bandage again, and he noticed the calluses on her fingers that spoke of hard work, despite her educated manner. "Where are you planning to stay?" Owen asked. "The boarding house is full up with folks who lost their homes when their wells ran dry." "I had not gotten that far in my planning," Sophia admitted. "I suppose I should find the town doctor and see about working with him." "Doc Henderson died 3 months ago," Owen said. "Heart gave out. We have been without any medical help since then." Sophia's eyes widened. "Then where do people go when they are injured or ill? They suffer mostly, or they die." Owen stood carefully, testing his shoulder. The bleeding had stopped, and while it hurt like blazes, he could move his arm. "You showing up might be the first good luck this town has had in half a year." "I will need somewhere to set up a proper practice," Sophia said, looking around the abandoned shop. "Do you think the owner would rent this space?" "Old Mrs. Morrison died last winter. The shop has been empty since. I imagine the bank holds the deed now, but I doubt they would object to someone putting it to use. Better than letting it sit here gathering dust." Sophia walked through the shop, her boots leaving prints in the dust on the floor. She examined the large front windows, the sturdy walls, the back room where she had treated Owen. He could see her mind working, already envisioning how to transform this forgotten place into something useful. "It could work," she said finally. "The front could be a waiting area, the back room for examinations and treatments. I would need to clean it thoroughly, of course, and acquire supplies." "I can help with that," Owen said before he fully thought through what he was offering. His own ranch was struggling, his cattle thin from lack of grazing land, his finances stretched to breaking. But something about this woman made him want to help her, to see her succeed in this harsh place. She turned to him with surprise. "You have already been shot on my account." "I could not ask you to do more." "You did not ask. I offered." Owen moved to stand beside her, looking out through the grimy window at the dusty street beyond. "Besides, having a real nurse in town might be what keeps us all alive until the rains come. When do you think that will be?" Sophia asked quietly. Owen shook his head. "Could be tomorrow. Could be next year. The land out here does not follow any rules I have ever been able to figure out. All I know is that it has been 8 months since we had any significant rain. Longest dry spell anyone can remember." Sophia was quiet for a moment, then said, "In Boston, when things seem darkest, my husband used to say that storms always pass. The rain always comes eventually. Your husband sounds like he was a wise man." "He was," Sophia said softly. He was also wrong about almost everything else, but he was right about that. Owen glanced at her, curious about the hint of bitterness in her voice, but he did not press. Everyone had their private sorrows, especially out here where the land had a way of stripping everything down to the bone. "I should find the banker," Sophia said, squaring her shoulders. "See about arranging use of this building." "That would be Chester Murray. His office is 2 streets over above the saloon. Fair warning, he is as tight with money as a miser with his last penny, but he might be reasonable given the circumstances." "And where might I find you, Mr. Vaughn? I should check that wound again tomorrow. My ranch is about 5 miles northeast of town. Anyone can give you directions." "But I will be back in town day after tomorrow for supplies, such as they are. I can meet you here if you like." Sophia nodded, and Owen saw a flash of nervousness cross her face. She was alone in a strange town, he realized, thousands of miles from everything familiar. Whatever had driven her from Boston must have been powerful indeed. "Miss Emerson," he said gently, "if you need anything at all, you can find help at my ranch. I know we just met under somewhat unusual circumstances, but out here we look after each other, or at least we try to." Her expression softened, and she gave him a genuine smile that made something in Owen's chest tighten. "Thank you, Mr. Vaughn. That means more than you know." Owen touched the brim of his hat in farewell and headed for the door. His shoulder throbbed with each step, but he felt oddly lighter than he had in months. Perhaps it was blood loss making him foolish, but he could not shake the feeling that Sophia Emerson's arrival meant something important. The next 2 days passed slowly for Owen. He tended his struggling cattle, rode his property checking for any sign of water, and thought far too much about green eyes and unexpected laughter. His foreman, an older man named Jack Carter, noticed his distraction. "You are not yourself, boss," Jack said as they mended a fence that hardly seemed worth fixing given they had almost no stock left to contain. "Shot does that to a man," Owen said, though they both knew that was not the whole truth. "Heard about the new lady in town," Jack said with a knowing look. "Heard she patched you up real nice. She is a nurse. That is what nurses do. Also heard she is pretty." Owen hammered a nail harder than necessary. "I did not particularly notice." Jack laughed, a dry sound like wind through dead grass. "Course you did not. That why you have been staring off toward town every 10 minutes. "I am concerned about the water situation," Owen said defensively. "Sure you are." Jack spat tobacco juice into the dust. "When you heading back to town?" "Tomorrow. Need to get more feed if any is available. Might want to check on that shoulder too. Make sure it is healing proper." Owen shot him a look, but Jack just grinned and went back to work. The old man had been with the ranch since Owen's father had run it, and he knew Owen better than anyone. There was no point in denying that Sophia had occupied his thoughts. That evening, sitting on his porch as the sun turned the horizon blood red, Owen allowed himself to think about her properly. It had been 3 years since Catherine had died. 3 years of focusing solely on keeping the ranch alive and trying not to drown in memories. He had convinced himself that part of his life was over, that at 32 he was too set in his ways and too broken by loss to feel anything for anyone again. But Sophia's laughter had stirred something in him, something he thought had dried up along with the creeks and springs. Hope, maybe. Or just the recognition that life somehow continued even in the hardest times. He rode into Fort Lyon early the next morning, his shoulders stiff, but healing cleanly. The town looked even more desolate in the harsh morning light. Several businesses had closed their doors permanently, their owners heading east or west in search of better prospects. The few people on the street moved with the slow, defeated shuffle of those who had fought too long against odds that never improved. But when Owen reached the old milliner's shop, he found a transformation in progress. The windows had been cleaned, and through them he could see Sophia sweeping the floor with vigorous strokes. The door stood open, and the sound of her humming drifted out into the street. Owen tied his horse and stepped inside. "Miss Emerson." She turned, and her face lit up with a smile. "Mr. Vaughn, I hoped you would come. Look at what I have accomplished." The change was remarkable. The dust was gone, the old hat forms and ribbons cleared away. She had arranged several chairs along one wall and set up a desk near the window. The back room, visible through the open door, had been transformed into a proper treatment area with a clean table and organized shelves. "This is impressive," Owen said honestly. "How did you manage all this in 2 days?" The banker, Mr. Murray, was surprisingly helpful once I explained my intentions. He even had some old furniture brought over from other abandoned buildings, and several townspeople have donated supplies. They seemed quite grateful to have medical care available again. Her cheeks were flushed with exertion and pride, and Owen thought she had never looked more beautiful. The realization startled him with its intensity. "Let me see your shoulder," Sophia said, already moving toward him with professional efficiency. Owen unbuttoned his shirt and carefully removed the bandage. Sophia examined the wound with gentle fingers, her brow furrowed in concentration. "It is healing well," she said. "No sign of infection." "You were fortunate." "I had a good nurse," Owen said, and was rewarded with a quick smile. "You should keep it clean and change the bandage daily. Come back in 3 days so I can check it again." "Yes, madam," Owen said, then hesitated. "Have you eaten breakfast?" Sophia blinked at the change in subject. "I had some bread earlier." "There is a decent restaurant over on 3rd Street. Well, decent by Fort Lyon standards anyway. Would you join me? Consider it payment for your medical services." She studied him for a moment, and Owen wondered if she could somehow see the nervousness he was trying to hide. Finally, she nodded. "That would be nice. Let me just wash my hands." They walked to the restaurant together, and Owen was aware of the curious looks from the townspeople they passed. News traveled fast in a small town, and he imagined everyone already knew about the shooting and Sophia's intervention. Let them look, he thought. He had nothing to hide. The restaurant, run by a widow named Mrs. Chen, was nearly empty. The Chinese woman greeted them with a tired smile and showed them to a table by the window. The menu was limited, supplies being what they were, but Mrs. Chen managed to produce eggs, biscuits, and coffee. "Tell me about your ranch," Sophia said as they ate. "You said it was 5 miles northeast." 5.5, Owen said. "It has been in my family for 20 years. My father started it right after the war, built it from nothing. When he died 10 years ago, I took over." "Do you have family nearby?" "No. My mother passed before my father." "I had a wife, Catherine, but she died 3 years ago. Fever took her one winter. We never had children." Sophia reached across the table and touched his hand briefly. "I am sorry." "Thank you. What about you? Any family in Boston?" A shadow crossed her face. "My parents died when I was 16. An influenza outbreak. My husband's family never approved of me. I was too poor, too common for their tastes. When he died, they made it clear I was no longer welcome in their circles." "That must have been difficult." "It was freeing in a way," Sophia said. "I realized I had been living in a cage, trying to be something I was not. Coming west gave me a chance to be myself again." Owen found himself telling her things he had not spoken of in years. About his father's dreams for the ranch, about Catherine and their too short time together, about the crushing weight of watching the land die from lack of water. Sophia listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she truly cared about the answers. In turn, she told him about Boston, about learning medicine from her husband despite the social scandals it caused, about the suffocating expectations of Eastern society. Her voice grew animated when she spoke of her work, of the satisfaction of helping people heal. "I know this might sound strange," she said, stirring sugar into her coffee, "but I feel more at home here after 3 days than I did in Boston after 3 years of marriage." "It does not sound strange at all," Owen said. "The West has a way of stripping away all the pretense. You are just yourself out here, for better or worse." They lingered over coffee far longer than necessary, the conversation flowing easily between them. Owen was struck by how natural it felt, how comfortable he was in her presence. When they finally left the restaurant, the sun was high overhead. "I should get back to the clinic," Sophia said. "I am expecting a patient this afternoon. Mrs. Chen's daughter has been having terrible headaches." "And I need to pick up supplies," Owen said, though he found himself reluctant to leave her company. They stood on the boardwalk, neither quite willing to say goodbye. "Mr. Vaughn," Sophia said finally, "would you consider helping me with something?" "Of course. I want to set up a proper clinic, but I need to understand the area better. The common ailments, the injuries people face, the challenges of living here. Would you show me around, not just the town but the surrounding area? Help me understand this place." Owen's heart lifted. "I would be happy to. When would you like to go?" "Sunday." "I should have things settled here by then." "Sunday it is. I will pick you up at dawn." Sophia's smile was radiant. "I look forward to it." Owen watched her walk back toward the clinic, her stride confident despite the dusty street and harsh sunlight. Then he headed to the feed store, his mood lighter than it had been in months. Sunday arrived clear and hot, the sun already burning by the time Owen rode into town. Sophia was waiting outside her clinic, dressed in practical riding clothes and holding a canteen. She had borrowed a horse from the livery, the stableman having been only too happy to extend credit to the new town nurse. "Ready for an adventure?" Owen asked. "Always," Sophia said, mounting her horse with practiced ease. They rode northeast out of Fort Lyon, following the dusty trail toward Owen's ranch. He pointed out landmarks and explained the layout of the land. The Arkansas River, reduced to a sad trickle, wound through the valley below them. The grasslands that should have been green were brown and brittle. "It is beautiful in its own way," Sophia said, gazing at the stark landscape. "Harsh but beautiful." "Wait until you see it after a good rain," Owen said. "The whole world turns green almost overnight. Wildflowers bloom everywhere. The grass grows tall enough to brush your stirrups. It transforms." "I would like to see that," Sophia said softly. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the creaking of saddles and the soft thud of hooves on packed earth. Owen showed her the boundary markers of his property, the dried creek beds, the few hardy cattle that remained. "How much stock have you lost?" Sophia asked. "Half my herd," Owen admitted. "Had to sell the rest at terrible prices just to afford feed. If the rains do not come soon, I will lose everything. But you stay. This land is all I have left of my family. My father's dreams are buried here." "Catherine is buried here. Where else would I go?" Sophia nodded, understanding in her eyes. "We all have our ties to place, I suppose, even when those places hurt us." They stopped for lunch on a low rise that gave a view of the surrounding country. Sophia had brought food from Mrs. Chen's restaurant, and they ate while watching a hawk circle lazily overhead. "You ever think about leaving?" Sophia asked. "Starting over somewhere else?" "Every day," Owen admitted. "But then I remember why I am here, not just the ranch but the people. Jack, my foreman, has nowhere else to go. The few hands I still employ depend on me. The other ranchers in the area, even men like Marcus Trent, they are all fighting the same fight. If we all give up, what happens to this place?" You have a strong sense of duty. Or I am just too stubborn to admit defeat, Owen said with a wry smile. Sophia laughed, that bright, clear sound that had captured Owen's attention days ago. I suspect it is both. They rode on through the afternoon, and Owen found himself telling Sophia things he had never shared with anyone. His fears about the future, his guilt over the cattle he had lost, his doubts about whether staying was brave or simply foolish. She listened without judgment, occasionally asking questions but mostly just letting him talk. When they finally returned to Fort Lyon as the sun was setting, Owen felt lighter somehow, as if sharing his burdens had reduced their weight. "Thank you," Sophia said as they dismounted outside the livery. "This helped me understand so much. Not just about the land, but about the people who live here." "Thank you for listening," Owen said. "I did not realize how much I needed someone to talk to." They stood close together in the fading light, and Owen was acutely aware of her presence. He wanted to reach out to touch her hand to close the small distance between them, but it was too soon, too presumptuous. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "It is a long ride back in the dark." "Be careful," Sophia said, "and come see me in a few days. I want to check that shoulder again." "I will," Owen promised. He mounted his horse and rode away, glancing back once to see her standing in the street, watching him go. His heart was pounding in a way that had nothing to do with the ride. Over the following weeks, Owen found reasons to visit Fort Lyon more frequently than strictly necessary. Sometimes it was to check his healing shoulder, sometimes to bring Sophia supplies she needed for the clinic, sometimes just to talk. Each visit deepened their connection, and Owen felt himself falling for her in a way he had thought impossible after Catherine's death. Sophia seemed to feel it too. Her eyes would light up when she saw him, and their conversations grew more personal, more intimate. They talked about their pasts, their hopes, their fears. They discovered shared loves of poetry and music, a mutual appreciation for honesty over pretense. One evening in early June, Owen arrived in town to find Sophia sitting on the steps of her clinic, tears streaming down her face. He was off his horse in an instant, kneeling beside her. "What happened? Are you hurt?" She shook her head, wiping at her tears. "A child died today, little Tommy Walsh. He was only 7 years old. Fever took him and there was nothing I could do." Owen sat beside her and put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, and they sat that way as the sun set and the stars began to appear. "I wanted to help people," Sophia said quietly, "but sometimes I cannot. Sometimes they die anyway and I feel so helpless." "You do help people," Owen said firmly. "Every single day. You saved my life. You have treated dozens of people in the past month. Some will die because death is part of life, but many more will live because of you. It does not feel like enough. It never does, but it is still everything." They sat in silence for a while longer, and Owen was struck by how right it felt to hold her, to offer what comfort he could. When she finally pulled away, she gave him a watery smile. "Thank you," she said, "for understanding, for being here." "Always," Owen said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. The drought continued through June and into July. The town grew more desperate, more tense. There were more fights over water, though none escalated to gunfire again. Sophia threw herself into her work, treating everything from dehydration to injuries from exhausted people making careless mistakes. Owen's ranch continued to deteriorate. He had to let 2 more hands go, keeping only Jack and a young man named Peter who had nowhere else to go. The cattle were gaunt shadows of themselves, and Owen spent his nights lying awake wondering how much longer he could hold on. But through it all, Sophia was a constant bright spot. Her laughter had become something Owen craved like water, her presence a balm to his worried soul. He loved the way she threw herself into helping people, the way she never gave up even when circumstances seemed hopeless. He loved her fierce independence and her vulnerable moments, her quick mind and her generous heart. He realized one evening as he watched her tend to a farmer's broken arm, completely and hopelessly in love with her. The revelation should have terrified him. After Catherine, he had been certain he would never feel this way again. But instead of fear, he felt a deep sense of rightness, as if this was exactly where he was supposed to be, exactly who he was supposed to love. The question was whether Sophia felt the same way. He got his answer on a sweltering evening in mid-July. They were sitting on the porch of her clinic, drinking lukewarm water and watching heat lightning flicker on the horizon. False promises of rain, nothing more. "I have been here 3 months," Sophia said suddenly. "It feels like a lifetime." "A good lifetime or a bad one?" Owen asked. She turned to look at him, her green eyes serious in the fading light. "Both. This is the hardest thing I have ever done, but it is also the most rewarding, and the best part of it, the very best part, is you." Owen's heart seemed to stop. "Sophia, let me finish," she said softly. "I came west to escape my past, to start fresh. I did not expect to find anyone. I certainly did not expect to find someone like you. But here you are, and you have become the best part of my days. When you visit, everything seems brighter. When you are gone, I count the hours until you return. I think I might be falling in love with you, Owen Vaughn, and it terrifies me." Owen reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "It terrifies me too. After Catherine died, I was certain that part of my life was over. I thought I would just keep working the ranch until either it killed me or I got too old to care anymore. But then you arrived, with your laugh like rain in a drought, and everything changed. I love you, Sophia. I have loved you almost since the moment we met." Tears shone in her eyes. "Truly." "Truly," he said, and then he was kissing her, soft and gentle at first, then deeper as she responded. She tasted like dust and hope, and Owen felt like he was drowning in the best possible way. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sophia laughed that beautiful laugh of hers. "I suppose this means we are courting." "I suppose it does," Owen said, grinning like a fool. "Though I should warn you, I am not much of a prize. Broke cowboy with a dying ranch is not every woman's dream." "Good thing I am not every woman," Sophia said, kissing him again. "I am just the one who loves you back." They sat together on the porch long into the night, making quiet plans for a future neither was entirely sure they would have. The drought showed no signs of breaking, and both their situations remained precarious. But for that one perfect evening, none of that mattered. They had found each other, and that was enough. Word of their courtship spread through Fort Lyon like wildfire. Most folks seemed pleased, happy that something good was happening amidst all the hardship. A few wagging tongues suggested Sophia was moving too fast after her husband's death, but she shut them down with a fierce dignity that made Owen love her even more. "I honored my husband by mourning him," she told Mrs. Barker, the worst gossip in town. "But I honor myself by choosing to live again. If you cannot understand that, then I pity you." August arrived with temperatures that made walking outside feel like stepping into an oven. The Arkansas River was now just a series of stagnant pools, and people were hauling water from wells that grew lower every day. Talk began of abandoning Fort Lyon entirely, of admitting defeat and heading to places where water still flowed. Owen knew his ranch was finished. He had 4 cattle left and no money for feed. The bank would foreclose within weeks. Jack had already left, heading south to look for work. Only Peter remained, too loyal or too stubborn to abandon ship. Owen was preparing to tell Sophia that he would have to leave, that he had no choice but to find work elsewhere, when she cornered him in her clinic one evening. I have a proposition for you, she said without preamble. I am listening. Move to town. Live here and help me run the clinic. I need someone to help manage things, to handle the business side while I focus on medical care. You know the people here, they trust you. We could be partners. Owen stared at her. Sophia, I am not a medical man. I do not know anything about running a clinic. You know about people. You know about managing resources and making hard decisions. That is what I need. She stepped closer, taking his hands in hers. Besides, I want you near me. I want to see you every day, not just when you can spare time for the long ride to town. We are building a life together, Owen. Let us actually build it, not try to maintain it across 5 miles of dead land. What would I do with the ranch? Let the bank have it. You have fought hard enough. It is time to stop bleeding for something that is already dead. Her words were harsh but true. The ranch was dead. Holding on to it was just pride at this point, and misplaced pride at that. What about Peter? Owen asked. He can work at the livery. Tom Henderson said he needs help, and Peter is good with horses. She had thought of everything. Owen felt a weight lifting from his shoulders, the weight of trying to save something that could not be saved. All right, he said. Yes, I will be your partner. Sophia's smile could have lit up the night. She threw her arms around him, and Owen held her tight, breathing in the scent of her hair and feeling more at peace than he had in years. He moved to town the following week, bringing what few possessions he still owned. Peter took the job at the livery and seemed relieved to be done with the doomed ranch. Owen set up a small room behind the clinic, simple but comfortable, and threw himself into helping Sophia. He discovered he had a knack for the administrative side of medical care. He kept track of accounts, ordered supplies, mediated payment disputes, and handled the endless details that came with running a business. Sophia focused on healing people, and together they made the clinic not just functional but successful. More importantly, they grew closer. Working side by side every day, sharing meals and conversation and the small intimacies of daily life, their love deepened into something solid and enduring. Owen learned Sophia's habits, the way she bit her lip when concentrating, the soft humming when she was content. She learned his silences, understanding when he needed space and when he needed comfort. In early September, as the drought entered its 14th month, Owen woke to an odd sound. It took him a moment to identify it, so foreign had it become. Rain. Gentle at first, then harder, drumming on the roof like 1,000 tiny fingers. He jumped out of bed and ran to Sophia's room. She was already awake, standing at the window with tears streaming down her face. "It is raining," she whispered. Owen wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood together watching water fall from the sky like a miracle. All over town, people were emerging from their homes, faces turned up to the rain, laughing and crying and dancing in the streets. "You said rain would come," Owen said into her hair. "You were right." "We both needed to believe it," Sophia said, turning in his arms to face him. "We both needed to have hope." They kissed in the rain-washed light of dawn, and Owen felt like everything that had come before, all the suffering and loss and struggle, had been leading to this moment. The rain continued for 3 days, soaking deep into the parched earth. When it finally stopped, the world looked different. The Arkansas River swelled with water, creeks began to flow again, and the first hints of green appeared across the brown landscape. Fort Lyon stirred to life like a person waking from a long fever. People who had been preparing to leave decided to stay. Businesses that had closed reopened. There was laughter in the streets again, and a sense that the worst was behind them. Owen and Sophia stood on the porch of the clinic, watching the transformation, and Owen knew the time had come. "Sophia Emerson," he said, taking her hand. I've been through the worst drought this land has ever seen, but you were rain when I needed it most. Your laughter brought hope back to my life. Will you marry me?" Sophia's eyes filled with happy tears. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." Owen pulled out a simple gold band he had purchased from the jeweler 2 days earlier during a break in the rain. It was all he could afford, but Sophia's face said it was perfect. "I love you," he said, sliding the ring onto her finger. "I love you too," she said, and kissed him while the townsfolk who had gathered on the street cheered. They married in October of 1878 in a simple ceremony at the Fort Lyon church. The whole town turned out to celebrate, even Marcus Trent, who shook Owen's hand and apologized for the shooting back in April. "We all do desperate things when we are scared," Owen said, accepting the apology. "She is a good woman," Marcus said, nodding toward Sophia. "You are a lucky man." "I know," Owen said, watching his bride laugh with Mrs. Chen and some of the other townswomen. The reception was held in the street, with tables set up and food contributed by everyone in town. It was not fancy, but it was real and filled with genuine affection. Owen and Sophia danced to a fiddler's tune, spinning under the clear autumn sky, and Owen thought his heart might burst from happiness. That night, in the room behind the clinic that was now their shared home, Owen and Sophia lay together as husband and wife. They made love slowly, tenderly, learning each other's bodies with reverent attention. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Sophia said, "I used to dream of a different life. A big house in Boston, society parties, everything proper and respectable." "And now?" Owen asked. "Now I have everything I actually wanted. Someone who loves me for who I really am. Meaningful work. A place where I belong. This is better than any dream." Even though that dream probably included more than one room and regular baths, Sophia laughed. "Even though. Although I would not object to a larger place eventually. I will see what I can do about that," Owen promised. The next year brought changes. The rains returned on a more normal schedule, and the land slowly recovered. Sophia's clinic thrived, and she became an indispensable part of Fort Lyon. Owen proved to have a good head for business, and he began to take on additional work managing accounts for other local businesses. By the spring of 1880, they had saved enough to buy a small house on the edge of town, with a real bedroom, a kitchen, and a spare room that Sophia immediately wanted to turn into a nursery. "I am not pregnant yet," she told Owen with a smile, "but I would like to be." "Well then," Owen said, pulling her close, "we should practice some more, just to make sure we do it right." Sophia became pregnant that summer, and their son was born in March of 1881. They named him Thomas Owen Vaughn, after the little Walsh boy Sophia had been unable to save and after Owen himself. He had his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair, and both parents were instantly, completely besotted. Owen discovered he loved fatherhood in a way he had not expected. Holding his son, watching Sophia nurse him, these simple moments felt more significant than anything he had accomplished with the ranch. This was the future, solid and squirming in his arms. "He is perfect," Owen said one night, watching Thomas sleep in his cradle. "He is," Sophia agreed, leaning against Owen's shoulder. "Just like his father, I am far from perfect. You are perfect for me. That is what matters." Fort Lyon continued to grow and prosper. New families moved in, attracted by the improving conditions and the presence of a good doctor. The clinic expanded, and Owen had to hire an assistant to help with the increased workload. The town was still small, still rough around the edges, but it was alive in a way it had not been during those dark drought months. Owen sometimes rode out to where his ranch had been. The bank had sold the land to a consortium of investors who parceled it out to new settlers. The house was gone, torn down for lumber, and Owen felt only a mild melancholy looking at the empty space. That life belonged to someone else now, someone he used to be. His real life was back in Fort Lyon, with Sophia and Thomas, with the clinic and their friends and the community they were building together. In the summer of 1883, Sophia gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Catherine Rose, after Owen's first wife and after Sophia's favorite flower. Thomas was delighted with his little sister, and Owen loved watching his family grow. "You ever miss Boston?" Owen asked Sophia one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the children play in the yard. "Never," Sophia said without hesitation. "That was not my life. This is. You are. I was just existing before I came here. Now I am living. No regrets, only that I did not come west sooner." She took his hand, her wedding ring catching the late sunlight. "What about you? Do you regret losing the ranch?" Owen thought about it seriously. "No, I thought I would, but I do not. That ranch was my father's dream, not mine. This, what we have built together, this is my dream. Even though you are married to a working woman. Even though I spend my days elbow deep in other people's blood and injuries. Especially because of that," Owen said. "You save lives, Sophia. You make a real difference. How could I regret being married to someone so remarkable?" Sophia blushed, something she still did even after 5 years of marriage. "Flatterer, truth-teller," Owen corrected and kissed her. The years passed peacefully. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books and learning. Catherine was wild and adventurous, always getting into scrapes and testing boundaries. Owen and Sophia weathered the challenges of parenthood together, supporting each other through sleepless nights and childhood illnesses, and the million small crises that came with raising children. The clinic became one of the most respected medical practices in southern Colorado. Sophia trained several young women as nurses, spreading her knowledge and creating a network of care throughout the region. Owen's business acumen helped other local enterprises thrive, and he became a respected figure in the community. In 1888, Fort Lyon celebrated its 20th anniversary as an official town. There was a large festival, and Owen and Sophia were asked to speak about their experiences. Standing before the gathered townspeople, Owen found himself thinking about that terrible day in April 1878 when Marcus Trent had shot him, when desperation and drought had driven decent men to violence. He thought about Sophia arriving like an answer to a prayer he had not known to say, about her laughter filling empty spaces in his heart. 10 years ago, Owen said, his voice carrying across the crowd, this town was dying. The land was dying. We were all dying, really, just too stubborn to admit it. I had given up hope that things would ever get better. He found Sophia in the crowd, her eyes warm with love and encouragement. And then rain came, he continued. Not the rain from the sky, though that came too eventually. But the rain of laughter, of hope, of one person who refused to give up even when everything seemed lost. My wife taught me that the darkest droughts are not in the land but in the heart, and that love is the rain that ends them. The crowd applauded, and Sophia came up to stand beside him. She took the podium and spoke about the importance of community, about how they had all saved each other through those hard times. Later, at home with their children asleep upstairs, Owen and Sophia sat together in the parlor. "You remember what you said to Marcus Trent and his men?" Owen asked. "That first day in the milliner's shop, I said a lot of things. I was terrified. You said the rain would come, that it always does. You were right about so much more than weather." Sophia smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. "We were both right. You kept believing in this place, in these people. That faith mattered." "I kept believing because of you," Owen said. "You were the faith when mine ran out." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of Fort Lyon outside their window. Somewhere a dog barked, a child laughed, a wagon creaked past. The sounds of life, of community, of home. In the years that followed, their life continued to unfold with the gentle rhythm of ordinary happiness. Thomas went to college in Denver, studying law, while Catherine became a teacher at the local school. Owen and Sophia grew older together, their hair graying but their love only deepening with time. The drought of 1878 became a story they told their grandchildren, a tale of hardship overcome and love found in the hardest places. Those grandchildren, 4 from Thomas and 3 from Catherine, would sit wide-eyed as Sophia described arriving in Fort Lyon with nothing but a medical bag and hope. And Grandpa was shot, the oldest grandson would always ask, thrilled by this detail. He was, Sophia would confirm, but he lived and we fell in love and here we all are. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1903, the town threw them a celebration. Owen and Sophia stood before their friends and family, their children and grandchildren surrounding them, and Owen felt overwhelmed by gratitude. "I was a man expecting rain would never come," he said in his speech, his voice rough with emotion. "The land was dead, my dreams were dead, and I was just going through the motions of living. Then rain arrived in her laughter and everything changed." He turned to Sophia, taking her hand. "You have been my rain for 25 years. Every single day with you has been a gift. I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." Sophia was crying, happy tears streaming down her face. "And you have been my home," she said. "My safe harbor in every storm. I love you, Owen Vaughn. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." They kissed while their family and friends cheered, and Owen felt the circle of his life complete. He had lost so much in his younger years, but he had gained infinitely more. The ranch was long gone, Catherine was a cherished memory. The drought was history. But this, what he had with Sophia, what they had built together, this was eternal. As evening fell and the celebration wound down, Owen and Sophia walked home through the quiet streets of Fort Lyon. The town had grown over the years, with electric lights recently installed on the main street, automobiles beginning to appear alongside horses. Change was constant, but some things remained the same. "You remember the first night it rained?" Sophia asked, her hand warm in his. "After all those months of drought, I remember everything about those days," Owen said. "They were the beginning of us." "They were," Sophia agreed. "Though really the beginning was your blood on my hands and bullets flying, not the most romantic of starts." Owen laughed. "No, but it was honest. This life we have built together has always been honest. No pretense, no games. Just 2 people who found each other when they both needed finding." They reached their house, the home they had shared for over 20 years. Inside, a lamp was burning in the window left by their daughter Catherine, who had come to help prepare for the anniversary celebration. "Thank you," Sophia said suddenly. "For what? For choosing me. For building this life with me. For being exactly who you are." Owen pulled her close, right there on their front walk, and held her as the Colorado night settled around them. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled, promising rain. "Thank you for arriving when you did," Owen said. "For being brave enough to come west, for being stubborn enough to stay, for being loving enough to take a chance on a broke cowboy with more problems than prospects." "Best decision I ever made," Sophia said, and kissed him with the same passion she had shown 25 years earlier. They went inside together, closing the door on the night and the world outside. Their story was not the stuff of dime novels or grand adventures. It was quieter than that, deeper, more real. It was the story of two people who found each other in a drought and learned that love could bloom even in the hardest soil. The years continued to pass with gentle grace. Owen and Sophia grew old together, their bodies aging but their spirits remaining young. They still worked at the clinic, though they had trained younger doctors and nurses to take over most of the day-to-day responsibilities. They spent their time with their grandchildren, with each other, with the community they had helped build. In the spring of 1915, at the age of 69, Owen fell ill with pneumonia. Sophia nursed him with all the skill and devotion she had shown to thousands of patients over the years, but this time medicine was not enough. One quiet morning in April, 37 years after they had first met, Owen slipped away peacefully with Sophia holding his hand. The town mourned him deeply. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched, and the stories told painted a picture of a good man who had lived a good life. But it was Sophia's words at the graveside that captured the truth of who Owen had been. "My husband was not a famous man," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "He did not do grand deeds or build empires, but he loved deeply and lived honestly. He taught me that the measure of a life is not in what we acquire but in what we give. He gave me his heart, his time, his unwavering support. He gave this town his wisdom and his labor. He gave his children a model of what a good man should be." She paused, looking at the casket that held her beloved. "He used to say I was the rain that ended his drought, but he was wrong. We were the rain for each other. Together, we transformed a desert into a garden." Sophia lived for another 5 years, still working at the clinic almost until the end. She died peacefully in her sleep in July of 1920, at the age of 67, and was buried beside Owen in the Fort Lyon Cemetery. Their children found a letter Sophia had written to be opened after her death. In it, she wrote about her life, her choices, and her great love. "If I could go back," the letter said, "and choose any life in any place with any person, I would choose this life, this place, this man. Every time. 10,000 times. Owen Vaughn was the unexpected joy that made everything else worthwhile. He was my home, my heart, my rain in the drought. I have lived a blessed life, and I die grateful for every moment of it." The clinic they had built together remained open for many more years, eventually becoming part of a larger hospital system. But a plaque on the wall commemorated its founders, Owen Vaughn and Sophia Emerson Vaughn, who had brought healing and hope to Fort Lyon during its darkest days. Their grandchildren and great-grandchildren spread across Colorado and beyond, but they all knew the story of how their family began. They knew about the drought of 1878, about a cowboy who had expected rain would never come, and about the nurse whose laughter brought hope back to a dying town. They knew about true love, the kind that endures all hardships and grows stronger with time. They knew about two people who found each other when they both needed finding, and who built a life together that blessed everyone around them. And on rainy days in Fort Lyon, when storms rolled across the plains and water fell from the sky to green the grass and fill the creeks, old-timers would remember Owen and Sophia Vaughn. They would remember how love had saved a town, how laughter had been like rain in a drought, how two people had proved that hope and faith and devotion could transform even the harshest landscape into something beautiful. Their story became a legend, told and retold, passed down through generations. Not because it was extraordinary, but because it was true. Real love, honest work, genuine community, these were the things that mattered. These were the things that endured. And so the cowboy who expected rain would never come, and the woman who arrived with laughter like water in a drought, lived on in memory and in the legacy of all they had built together. Their love story was written in the streets of Fort Lyon, in the clinic that still bore their names, in the faces of their descendants, and in the hearts of everyone who had known them. It was a simple story, really. Two people met, fell in love, built a life together, and grew old holding hands. But in its simplicity was its power. Because at the end of the day, after all the grand adventures and dramatic moments, what really matters is the person whose hand you hold, the life you build together, and the love that sustains you through every drought and every storm. Owen and Sophia knew this truth. They lived it every day for 37 years of marriage. And in living it, they created something that outlasted them both. A testament to the power of love, the importance of hope, and the truth that rain always comes eventually, to those who keep believing it will. Their story was complete, their ending happy and whole. They had lived, loved, laughed, struggled, and triumphed together. They had raised children who became good people, built businesses that served their community, and created a marriage that was a model for all who knew them. And when the rains came to Fort Lyon each spring, watering the land and bringing forth new growth, people would remember. They would remember that sometimes the most important rain falls not from the sky but from the laughter of a good woman and the love of a good man. They would remember Owen and Sophia Vaughn, and they would smile, and they would hold their own loved ones a little closer, because that is what a great love story does. It reminds us all of what is possible, what is precious, and what is worth fighting for. Owen and Sophia's story did exactly that. It began with a gunshot and desperation, grew through kindness and hope, bloomed into deep and abiding love, and ended with two lives well lived and a legacy that would never fade. The cowboy expected rain would never come. Then rain arrived in her laughter. And everything, absolutely everything, changed for the better. That was the story. That was the truth. That was the legacy of Owen and Sophia Vaughn, and it would endure as long as there were people in Fort Lyon to remember, to tell, and to believe in the transformative power of love.